Hello everyone, this is part 27 of What If Naruto was in Anbu at 6, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. The gates of Suna loomed on the horizon. The white limestone practically shining in the afternoon sun, the surrounding wall that circled the village made of sandstone and plaster opaque in comparison, the arid desert sands at its base, so hot they seemed to make the air simmer with the heat. But to the hundreds of refugees that now made their way towards this village, the gritty, dusty, dirty visage of what they had strived through hardships and dangers to get to could not have been more beautiful to their eyes. The sighs of relief floated through the air, like leaves caught in the breeze. Daisuke listened to their words, a smirk finding its way onto his face. Oh Suna, we've made it. Thank goodness. The Anbu commander took his place on a dune, a bit to the side of where the refugees paved their path closer to Suna, watching as his men held a perimeter around the caravan. He let his eyes scan over the civilians, seeking out one in particular, though this one was only a civilian in the technical sense at this point. He found her easily enough, she wasn't hard to miss despite her efforts to the contrary. All around her were dozens of people, each heaping their praise and gifts upon the girl by the ton. With the enthusiasm of his own men, it was only natural that the civilians, once they had caught up to them, would find out about the girl's exploits. He had seen, and heard her try to correct some of these claims and statements, but the human's natural and uncanny ability for exaggeration was in full effect, and at this point he and his men were barely even in the story. He didn't care really, about the recognition, or the fame. In fact, he was grateful for it. No, what had him watching the girl was what he could already see being built right before his eyes. They were placing her on a pedestal, they were making her into their hope. It wasn't surprising really. This victory, her victory, was the first definitive clean sea victory against Konoha in years. Iwa had fought, and held out, but eventually lost when the cage of Konoha himself marched onto the field of battle. Kumo had fought and driven them back, but had practically destroyed their own village to do so, and all battles since those two had been truly just been skirmishes, nothing definitive and nothing significant. This had been a skirmish too, but this was a skirmish that had not only involved none other than the famous Hatake Kakashi, but had also been witnessed by roughly 30 Chunin. And those Chunin had spread the word to nearly 1,000 refugees. And those refugees were ignorant of military matters. They didn't know or care as to the skill level of her opponents. That she had taken on a squad of Chunin. They just cared that she had taken on a squad, single-handed. And they didn't care that Kakashi had chosen to retreat. To them, retreat was synonymous with defeat. To them, she had beaten Kakashi. There was nothing else. But he knew the truth, and he could tell she knew it too. That battle could have gone either way, one false move from either side and the tides would have turned in a second. Kakashi had made a tactical withdrawal, not a retreat. And that is why, this vision that they now saw, building itself and coming ever more closer, terrified the both of them. They were laying all of their hopes that Konoha could be defeated on her, and if she fell, then they would all fall with her. Ino slowly made her way through the mass of people. When the guard had yelled out that he could see the column, the courtyard of the front gate became a bee convention as everyone seemed to morph out of the walls and cobblestone floors in order to be the first to catch a glimpse of the refugees as they arrived. Particularly she noticed many of her fellow Konoha exiles in the crowd, apparently the faint glimmer of hope or excitement that old friends would be in this reputedly large contingent of refugees was enough to draw them here. Peeking her head over the people, she managed to catch the sight of pink hair from her peripheral vision. Sakura, she called out and saw the girl snap her head around to face her. Quickly adjusting her course, she pushed her way past the tightly packed crowd and saw the Haruno glancing around, searching for her. Sakura, over here, Ino said, finally pushing her way past the people, making Sakura turn to face her as she smiled. Ino, the pinkette greeted, hugging her longtime friend when she came in close. It was then Ino caught sight of two others standing just a few feet away. Pulling away from Sakura, Ino's greeting was cheerful, but held within it a hint of hesitation. Hanakiba, you're here too. Hana turned to face Ino, her wolfish smirk adorning the quirk of her lips but not fully reaching her eyes. Damn right. I wouldn't miss this for the world. Kiba's response was a nod, the small, strained smile of his lips now somewhat of a common sight to his friends. Ino worried for him, they all did. Perhaps that was the reason his condition right now was so delicate. Because none of them could really hide their worry, none could shrug off what had happened to him, what was happening to him. And because of that they could not treat him as they used to, they could not treat him the same, and so that alone was a constant reminder of just what he had lost, as if the empty space beneath the cloth that was now draped over his left side wasn't enough of a reminder. Hey Ino, he greeted somewhat awkwardly. A lot of fuss over this, eh? Wonder if it was the same for us. Maybe. Ino nodded. I can't really remember. Well, if we did get a reception this big when we got here, then they did a magnificent job of hiding from us. Ino and the other three turned to face the newcomer, finding the red spiky mane of Akamaiki Chuji as the heavyweight awkwardly made his way through the crowd of people towards his friends, his cheerful smile in place. Hey guys, how's it going? Chuji, Sakura and Ino said delightedly, hugging their plump friend in greeting as Hana nodded with her familiar smile. Kiba nodded as well. Hey big guy, how's it going? He questioned, bringing Chuji's attention to him. Again that hesitant smile came to Chuji's face, as it came to all of his friends when they looked at him now as the Akamaiki stepped forward. I'm good man. He said, shaking Kiba's hand and giving him a one-armed hug. How you holdin' up? Kiba smiled, placing his hands on the Akamaiki's shoulder. I'm okay, really. He added, watching as Chuji drifted his eyes away from his own. Chuji nodded before he looked to the now parting gates. So any rumors going around? He questioned. Not right now, Sakura answered, shrugging. At least, nothing official anyway. Chuji and the others turned to face the Pinkett. What do you mean? Hana questioned. What she means are the two Anbu commanders that Gaara had been chewing out last night. Said Shikamaru from his place to the side as if he'd been standing there the whole time, the butt of a lit cigarette firmly between his lips, smoke wafting into the air as he joined his friends. Sakura nodded. I could hear him all the way down on the 6th floor. That's 2 whole floors below him. I haven't heard him that angry in a while. I poked around a bit with the receptionists and security details, and they said that those 2 commanders abandoned the bulk of the refugee column, you know, the poor, the sick and the injured. They left them in favor of getting some of the more privileged families out when Konoha caught up. They say the attack was led by Hitaki Kakashi, so it's a bit of a surprise to hear that there are still so many refugees that are arriving today. I'm not sure, but I think I heard that there were 3 commanders on the mission. I can guess that the other decided to do the right thing and turn back around. Ino nodded. Makes sense. Still, you think that a single Anbu commander and his squads could drive back someone like Kakashi? I've heard that guy can copy any technique you use and turn it back against you. Shikamaru took another long drag of his cancer stick before putting it out beneath his foot. He's a man of F&B just like us, and no ninja is invincible. A heavy silence descended on the 6 ninja as all of their thoughts turned almost in synchronization to one particular individual, who many would argue was one who could prove such a statement wrong. The echoing crack of the massive gate as it was pulled open brought their attention away from the conversation, the grating, massive iron hinges screeching loudly as they were forcefully pivoted, granting passage into the village. Shikamaru tapped Sakura on the shoulder, catching her and the others' attention as he pointed to the other end of the courtyard. Look, Gaara's here. They each turned their eyes onto the gestured area, finding that indeed, the Kazekage was making his way into the courtyard, Baki at his side. It did not take long for the courtyard to be flooded with hundreds of more people once the gate was fully open, with hundreds more still waiting outside the gate in order to enter. Chunin and Genin did their rounds, gathering supplies, weapons, camping equipment and animals, leading them away from the people to have them registered and inspected for weapons, either explosive or toxic in nature. Gaara watched all this with apathy from where he stood, sharp green eyes scanning the crowd. Finally he saw Daisuke, as the spear-wielding Anbu began making his way closer. When he was roughly 4, maybe 5 feet away, the commander bowed to the Kazekage. Kazekage-sama, the refugees are safe. I can see that, Commander. Gaara said flatly before smirking. You did well. Rest assured that Cobra and Tiger have received their proper reward for their actions on the field. If I could, I would promote you for your bravery, but if I promote you, I'd have to retire. Daisuke offered his own smile at the joke but soon shook his head. My lord, though I helped, if you want to thank the one who was the key to this victory you must look to another. Gaara looked momentarily taken aback but watched as the Anbu commander looked back over his shoulder gesturing two of his chunin with a quick hand movement. The men nodded before turning and walking into mass of refugees, pushing past the lethargic BFF as they sought the girl out. A few moments later Gaara could see the refugees parting, giving way to a single girl that was flanked by the two chunin that had been sent to retrieve her. They kept the distance though, slightly behind her, their eyes staring at the girl as though she was a cage herself, that hint of disbelief, admiration and awe evident in their expression. Gaara eyed the approaching woman up and down, she clung the heavy wool cloak tightly over herself, it was raggedy, the edges in tatters, her head was ducked down, trying to avoid his gaze and practically everyone else's as she stepped closer, her body seemingly weighed down with dread and nervousness with each step she took towards him. Finally she stood just 2 feet in front of him and Gaara absently noted the hush that fell over his courtyard, broken only by the whispered murmurs of a few of the more avid gossipers. Gaara cleared his tea as he looked down at the hooded woman who was a good 2 inches shorter than his 5 feet 10. Commander Daisuke tells me that you are the reason for our victory over Konoha. He paused watching as she shifted a bit from foot to foot. Is that true? A pause. Yes. Her voice was faint, hesitant, weak. She did not display the countenance of a woman who had just saved hundreds of people from Sharingan no Kakashi's strike force. Gaara's eyes narrowed a bit as he watched Daisuke also eye the girl with a confused stare. Well, why doesn't the hero reveal herself? He saw her mouth open for a second as if to argue but eventually closed and with a resigned air she raised her hands and pulled the hood back, revealing bright blonde hair and sky blue eyes. Gaara recognized her instantly. To his credit, the Kazekage gave no outward reaction to her face, instead nodded to her and the rest of the men before turning to Baki. Keeping his voice low he made sure that only his former sensei would hear him. Conduct a thorough search, then make sure you lead the refugees to the living arrangements we've managed to set up for them along the southern wall. I want the chunin in office and debriefed in 2 hours tops. As you command, Baki said with a stiff, formal bow before he went off to carry out his orders. Gaara turned his eyes to Daisuke and Akina, the both of you come with me please, there is much to discuss. The hidden meaning of his words was not lost on Akina, nor was the sharp glint of his turquoise green eyes. Minutes later as the door to the Kazekage's office shut behind the Anbu commander and the rogue Kunoiki, it did not take long for the Kazekage to round back fully to face the girl and Anbu. What are you doing here? There wasn't any anger in his tone but there was a definitive edge to it that made her consider her words carefully. Daisuke from his place in front of the door let his eyes go from the girl to his Kazekage in confusion. Not receiving a quick answer from her, Gaara turned his eyes to Daisuke. Commander, did you have any idea that this girl is in fact a Kunoiki of Kumo, a Kunoiki, which before I left Kumo was rumored to be mentally unstable? Daisuke shook his head, his composure unshaken from the Kazekage's glare. No sir, I did not. Gaara nodded before turning back to Akina. I hope you have not come here seeking asylum. Because as it stands the immediate and official protocol should be to detain you, and transfer you back to Kumo's custody at the earliest available opportunity. At his words Akina's eyes filled with dread, she knew that was the official action the books dictated in this sort of situation but hearing it was something else. No, she nearly yelled before collecting herself. Continuing in a normal tone after her outburst. No please don't send me back to Kumo. Zhuge Liang, you don't know him, he's not what you think. Please. I can fight. I'll swear myself to Suna's service if I have to, just don't send me back. Daisuke watched the desperation clawing at her insides, working their way into the edges of her eyes. If I may sir, the Anbu commander spoke interrupting the girl and village leader. When she attacked the enemy it drove me and my men to do the same. When we emerged victorious the men all began, well, for lack of a better word, worshipping her. Gaara sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose, quickly deducing what the man was getting to. And those men spoke to the refugees and the refugees are now speaking to our civilians just as the chunin are speaking to our other ninja. The tale being exaggerated and exaggerated with each telling, which means that this hero worship may only be just beginning. Which would make imprisoning, and transferring the new hero of Suna detrimental to the men's morale and the support of the village. I understand the situation. he said with an aggravated breath as he threw his head back in aggravation. Akina bit her lower lip to keep from speaking. God, she did not want to return to Kumo, she wouldn't return to Kumo. The thought of taking orders from Liang and Tsunade again made her stomach churn with dread and her bee boil with seething anger. But she realized that at this point her best bet was to remain quiet while the Kazekage thought. Finally Gaara's eyes opened and he turned to face her. I assume you wanted to stay here. A slight pause which he quickly interrupted before she had a chance to answer. Either way, the decision has been removed from your hands. Your actions have set circumstances which forces me to not only keep you in my village but also give you a place in the military. He snapped his fingers and too soon Anbu appeared at the girl's side, flanking her. These men will take you to the hospital. I have not forgotten those rumors that had been floating around the Kumo hospital about your mental health before I left the village. We will test you on that, if you come out clean then. He paused, eyes shifting to the Anbu commander at his side. Then you will be placed in a probationary service period under the command of Commander Daisuke here. I warn you, that though I may give you a position in our forces today, when Kumo discovers your presence here, because they will, if they demand your immediate return into their custody, I will not stand in their way. Am I understood? Akina blinked, her mouth slightly agape as she tried to fully comprehend everything that had just passed through the Kazekage's lips before she quickly caught herself. Nodding quickly, she bowed. Why yes, Kazekage-sama. She turned, the Anbu at her sides quickly escorting her out of the office. Daisuke remained behind, eyes staring to the Kazekage as the redhead sighed again, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Kazekage, that was rather abrupt, wasn't it? Unfortunately, Daisuke-san. Gaara began, shifting through the papers on his desk. I do not have the time to spend hours arguing a single point in which the decision has practically been made for me. He finished, looking up to the commander. In order to win this war, the men must believe we can win this war, and she, he pointed outside his door, is the only one that has brought that belief to our ninja in years. If I remove her from the scene now, we will be even worse off than what we were before her. Once we've brought a few more victories to us, without her help, then it will be safer to give her to Kumo, until then she is with us. Daisuke nodded. I understand, Kazekage Dono. I will keep my eyes on her. Gaara nodded. Commander, he offered one last warning. You must be ready. With her in your unit, victories will only get harder to achieve with every one, and defeat will be all the more crushing. Daisuke nodded, bowing low once to the Kazekage before turning and leaving the redhead to his business. The Kazekage sighed as he looked up to the ceiling. He wasn't sure how he knew, but something in his gut assured him that this girl's achievement would carry much more significance than a few village rumors. Naruto sat in his office, eyes closed, hands laced together as he rested his forehead on them, elbows on the table. His face was as blank as ever, but the crease of his brow and the thin lines of tension strewn about his features gave away his perturbation at the news he had just been given. The individual who had presented this report and was the cause of his current thoughts still stood in the room. When Kakashi had rejoined Ibiki at the rally point, he had immediately left all matters pertaining to the men, the garrison, and any attack or defensive countermeasures to him. He had packed up whatever he needed to pack up and left, under the premise that the information he had could not afford to be leaked to anyone but Naruto. Ibiki hadn't been happy, but the interrogator knew the value and dangers of sensitive information. It also helped that he knew that he wouldn't have been able to stop Sharingan no Kakashi if the man was really set on leaving, which he was. So here he stood, eye fixed on the man who would bring the world to its knees as he sat behind his desk. Even without the Sharingan, Kakashi could tell, this news was something that, to him, was not entirely unexpected. Though it was common knowledge that Naruto did not like to be questioned, hell no leader really did, Kakashi decided to brave the possible consequences of his words as he let them slip through his lips. Naruto, do you know who she is? Naruto brought his eyes up, the shards of blue glazed with a strange boredom as the gaze met his. Yes, I do, he stated simply, watching Kakashi for any reaction to his words before he continued. She's my sister. The statement was so simple, so flatly delivered that Kakashi's mask actually dropped a centimeter or two as his mouth fell wide open, eyebrows vanishing into his silver hairline. You're what? The man hailed as Sharingan no Kakashi questioned, his voice pitching itself at the last word in order to demonstrate his incredulity. Naruto said nothing, merely blinking as he watched Kakashi visibly trying to compose himself, his mouth opening and closing several times as his hands twitched, their motions indicating questions that were off before they were spoken until finally one broke through the frenzy that was currently making its way through the copy ninja's mind. Since when have you had family? Since when indeed, the blonde thought. The words spoken were different though. She was hidden away from the council. She lived with a foster family, the both of us, ignorant of the other. When I took control of Konoha, her family. She's been hiding in Kumo until recently. Now it appears she has turned Suna into her home. Or at least intends to. The power you witnessed is the same that I hold. The 9 tails. The blonde paused, visibly thinking how best to explain the reason for that particular detail. Too powerful to seal into one, so divided into 2. She holds 4 tails and I hold 5. Kakashi swallowed, visibly gathering his composure before he spoke up. Well, how long have you known that she was your sister? He stated awkwardly, forcing himself to not his forehead as he realized just how stupid he sounded, pausing as if tasting the word in his mouth. It was such a strange concept. Naruto, with relatives. So unbelievable in fact that in the copy ninja's mind it was actually more stunning to hear about that than the fact that the 9 tails was actually split. Though the fact that he had more or less suspected such a thing since his confrontation with the girl 2 days ago on the dunes of the Suna border may have helped. That question is irrelevant, Naruto said, standing up and marching around his desk. He stood directly in front of Kakashi, making the copy ninja feel very small as he did so. The blonde godime glared. What matters is, that if the villages under my control will remain under my control, they must believe certain things. One of those, is the belief that I control the full power of the Kyuubi. I trust you to keep your silence. The veiled threat in his words was not lost on Kakashi as the blonde's eyebrow quirked just a bit. The copy ninja nodded just a little too swiftly. The blonde grunted as he straightened, turning back to his desk. He walked around it in order to take his previous position at his seat. Still, whether or not you realize it, your retreat from that field of battle may yet prove to be quite a problem in the coming months. Kakashi's brow furrowed a bit. Why? It was just a small skirmish. Sure, we lost the civilians that were fleeing Suna, but the most that could cost us would be, at most, a little bit of economic stability and military strength number-wise, but over the last decade we've swelled our coffers as well as our military force beyond anything anyone thought possible. Even with the recent desertions and battles, we are still the numerical superior to our opponents, and we obviously have the stronger ninja. What must be done to conquer a people, Kakashi? Naruto asked rhetorically. You must break their spirit, their will to resist. And the first step and most important is removing all hope that they can resist. If Akina would have driven back just your squads of Chunins, it would have meant nothing. A skilled Chunin who did something brave. But she did not defeat just a squad of Chunin, she defeated you. You, Sharingan no Kakashi, the copy ninja, 1000 Jutsu Hatake. And that will bring the people hope. Kakashi finished, and prolong the war. Naruto stood, walking toward the balcony. Now we only need to see by how much. Looking at the copy ninja over his shoulder, he met the man's single black eye. You are dismissed, Hatake. Begin the trip to return to your men tomorrow. Once you arrive, swear them to secrecy. Kumo and Suna will not risk telling the world of her status as a Jinchuriki in order to avoid the eyes of the Akatsuki. And we cannot afford to do so either if we are to stop from fanning the flames of hope she has already sparked. Kakashi nodded, bowing once before he left the office. Naruto allowed his eyes to scan over the village, taking a deep, slow breath as he did. Foolish girl. Naruto sat in his office in contemplation, eyes staring blankly at some spot on his desk, papers unattended as they lay strewn in an unorganized mess. That sight in particular was nothing new to Suzume. His desk may as well be made of papers considering how many passed over it every day. What was peculiar to her though was the fact that Naruto was not working on those papers. He usually tackled all the paper work with that near mechanical efficiency of his and then contemplated his thoughts after, for something to distract him enough to leave what she assumed was about 30% of this morning's paperwork unfinished. Well, it had to be a pretty big something. Now normally when someone she knew was in deep thought, depending on her mood, she'd ask what they were thinking about or she'd just leave them be. Knowing Naruto, it'd probably be wiser to go for the second option, but considering her curious mood, and the desire to have something to brag about later, she really wanted to try the first. After all, being an office assistant in a ninja village didn't give you many tall tales to tell sitting around a living room with friends who probably did more exciting things in a single hour than most office workers did in a lifetime. So choosing to be a bit daring, she leaned slightly on one of the leather chairs in front of his desk. Got something on your mind, do you, Naruto-sama? Naruto's eyes shifted to her for the span of a single second before returning to their previous location. Do you not have work to do? Nope, she responded with a smirk. All done, unlike you apparently. She remarked as she took a seat. So what's on your mind? You never think this much on a subject, or at least I've never seen it. It is none of your concern. Naruto responded in his typical dismissive manner. Oh come on. She prodded. I'm burning minutes off my lunch break for this. At the sight of his eyes, ever so narrowed in that deceptively calm way of his directed towards her, she decided it would be best to add the familiar placating, please, at the end of her sentence, hoping for the best. Naruto's eyes returned once again to their previous location. Oh come on now, she huffed. Give me a hint at least. Smirking, she added somewhat teasingly. Girl trouble. Now one should keep in mind that while a genius when it comes to fighting, strategical movements and generally most things that have to do with combat, Uzumaki Naruto is quite handicapped when it comes to normal human conversation. And his ability to take things, especially statements made, literally, well, it's what started this whole fiasco to begin with. Taking this into account, his answer, or rather his query, isn't so surprising. How did you know? Not taking this into account, however, and one tends to get a reaction like the one Suzume was displaying right now, eyes wide open, mouth hanging limply, and disbelief etched so firmly into her features it looked like it may have been carved there. Are you serious? Naruto nodded before repeating. How did you deduce it? She blinked stupidly for several moments as she fell back, allowing herself to rest against the chair. I just guessed, she admitted, only half paying attention. She was almost dazed, as if she'd been hit over the head with something. The blonde drawled, the fingernails of his index and middle finger scraping along his right temple repeatedly as his brow scrunched slightly. Quite a nuisance that foolish girl is becoming. Suzume's nose wrinkled, her eyes traveling up toward the ceiling as she tried to think of who she knew who could become a nuisance to him. Coming up with a blank, she decided to just ask. Who are you talking about? That so-called Angel of Suna. The blonde answered, the la rolling off his tongue like a growl. Suzume did a double take before rolling her eyes and breathing, what she could only describe as a sigh of relief. The thought of Naruto of all people with a woman, worse yet, a woman that was giving him problems, it was a scary thought really. Shrugging off her previous stupefaction due to the misunderstanding, she shrugged, deciding to state the obvious. So why don't you just K her? Pausing for a moment, she decided to add, you're obviously good at that. As an afterthought. Most people would have been offended by the statement, but to Naruto it was a simple statement that pointed out an undeniable truth, so he took it in stride, continuing the conversation with his usual nonchalance. It's more complicated than that, he admitted. Why? The assistant questioned with a quirk of her eyebrow. Sabaku no Gara. Naruto answered simply. Jinchuriki of the Shukaku controls sand. The desert is his territory, and while I may be able to defeat him in a fight, his abilities could cost our forces more than we can afford right now with Kumo still standing. Now, while she wasn't a combat nin, her many years of filing and managing various forms of paperwork, which included supply routes, troop movements and command orders, had taught her a thing or two about strategies. And while most of these things she'd learned by listening to him or reading over some of his forms, she figured she could at least try to help. Then why not get rid of Kumo first? Zhuge Liang. Naruto answered simply again. Attacking his home territory is a foolish endeavor. His strategies and tactics will also most likely cost us more than we can handle now. He released another sigh. We need a way to quickly destroy one while making certain we have enough in our reserves to take care of the other. In case the Sabaku girl does not honor her end of our little deal. Well, I don't know, he certainly did a number on us last time we invaded, but he seems to have lost the most. I hear it's costing nearly 3 million a month just to secure raw materials to rebuild most of the defensive structures of their village. Naruto's eyes seemed to widen minutely for a brief moment, realization dawning on his features. His head pulled itself away from its resting place on his palm as he turned his head fully to face her. That's it, he stated as his eyes began darting around before he stood up, walking over to the map framed on the far wall. What's it? The startled assistant questioned in confusion. Naruto didn't answer, instead giving a simple order as he usually did. Send a message to Ginchiko, tell her to return to the mainland as soon as possible. Orders given, he quickly walked out of the room with Suzume's bemused, okay, at his back. The red glow of the setting Kumo sun cast deep dark shadows over the land, darkened blankets like tendrils gripping the earth and surfaces with more and more fervor as the sun continued to disappear. The pieces are moving. Zhu Liang's soft voice floated through the empty air of his home, trailing its way into Yue Ying's ears as she sharpened the point of her hook spear. Already knowing that he had her attention without needing to look, he continued, the smoke from the incense making the light that reached his eyes shift eerily in the mid-sunset light. It may not seem like it now, but because of that girl in Suna, events have been set in motion, events that cannot be undone. You mean the angel of Suna? Ying stated, eyes gaining an inquisitive look. You really think she's done something that important? Liang turned to face her now, his back facing the rapidly dimming light beyond the horizon. Not I, no. What I think doesn't matter, it's what the people think. He looked down to the floor, his hand brushing his goatee lightly as if in contemplation. You can see it even here. Conversations break out about that girl and her latest victories over Konoha in Suna, and hope enters our ninjas' voices. Her tale becomes more and more extravagant, more grand, and more do they put their faith in her. More valiantly do they fight for her. The sleeping dragon took a few steps into his house, placing the white feathered fan to rest on a small tea table before lacing his hands behind his back. Because of this, Uzumaki's hand has been forced. And he will strike swiftly, harshly, but not prematurely, he is too intelligent for that. The men under that girl's command are brave, but bravery will not be enough to defeat Uzumaki alone. And unfortunately for us, with his vastly superior resources and reserves, it is he who will decide what field of battle we will eventually meet on. That girl will have to be protected then. Ying said in reply. She has become too valuable to allow her to fall in battle now. Yes, you are right, of course. Liang nodded once in agreement, still not facing her. Yue Ying remained silent for a moment, eyes shifting in contemplation before turning back to him. Juge, with Akina S. She paused, closing her eyes for a brief moment as the image of the girl came to her mind once again before vanishing. You will have to fight him, do you think you can win? Zhu Liang held his tongue for a moment, the hard set of his jaw giving her the answer she already knew he would give. When he began, his voice was hesitant, tight with apprehension. I have never fully tested my power against Uzumaki Naruto. For nearly a decade he has led his armies to war, and wide has his will and power spread in that time. Though my strategies may be better than his, it may be the only thing I have that is better than his. Ruses, guile and deception can only last so long before he adapts. He will be difficult to defeat, as a Jinchuriki he cannot s by normal means. Can you beat him? Juge, she asked again, demanding a straight answer from her gaze. The sleeping dragon allowed his eyes to turn towards her for a moment before he sighed. His response, like all things with him, carried its own hidden meaning. Not as a ninja. Temari grumbled as she made her way through the mansion. Hinata, for once, wasn't behind her, having been called away back to her clan estate, of which she had been shirking the duties to her younger sister for far too long. She thought she'd be grateful for the Hyuga's absence when she first became aware of it, but that thought was quickly withdrawn as the day ran its course. Hinata may have been as stiff as a board and about as much of a conversationalist as one, but hell, it was better than nothing. Now all she had for company was the good old Anbu that hid their presence from her. In other words, she was bored. She'd spent the first few hours of her day after she'd taken her shower in the library again, then she'd gone off to the gardens, using leaves and small twigs to practice her wind abilities again. Then she'd gone to the kitchen, fixed herself something, and then finally back to her room to sleep for a bit. When she woke up, she took another shower and was now headed toward the library again. Joy. If she didn't get out of here soon, she'd be more likely to s her own wrists out of boredom than be in danger of Kumo's A. Parting the door to the library, she stopped at the doorway as her eyes took in the sight of none other than Uzumaki Naruto sitting in one of the library's various desks, sorting through a few of the books. Eyes scanning over them quickly, he paused at her sound, glancing up with his eyes alone as he slowly closed the book and set it down. I was informed you were asleep, he said slowly, his bored eyes easily meeting her stubborn gaze. I was, she responded with a quick nod, shifting nervously from foot to foot before she caught herself and forced herself to stop. Shielding the unease she felt inside of her heart, glaring at him for all she was worth. Naruto continued to meet her gaze with nonchalance. And what are you doing up so late? She questioned, venom dripping from her words. Glancing to the books, she barely held back her own sneer. Let me guess. Planning your grand salvation of another village. Or are you still honest enough to call it planning of AM? Since that is what you usually do. Naruto blinked slowly for a moment, choosing not to answer the obviously rhetorical question before he turned his eyes to the next book, grabbing the text and opening it to scan over its contents. He heard Temari snort in something he could only identify as disdain. He heard her step further into the room, taking a seat in one of the many leather chairs that furnished the library. He was somewhat surprised by this, having expected her to leave once she saw that he was in the room. But again, he paid it no mind, putting his focus on the task at hand. There was a silence between the two for what seemed, to Temari at least, like an eternity. She didn't even really know why she stayed in the room. She supposed it was partially due to the fact that this room held the books that were her only source of entertainment for her in this house, and partially due to her own legendary stubborn nature rearing its head. Though what she was being stubborn about even she wasn't sure. She glanced at Naruto from the corner of her eye, the sight of him there, just standing as he read over those books, probably on how to lead a desert campaign, made her boil. She had already agreed to tell her brother of Kumo's deceptions. But apparently even that wasn't enough for him to simply give it a rest. And she had to wonder, really, if he ever could switch off. And if he couldn't, then what the hell would a world under him become? Do you enjoy what you do? She questioned, craning her end to the side in order to face him fully. Naruto's attention was brought toward her with the question. Excuse me. K. She clarified. Do you like K other people? You have to like something to be so good at it. Naruto blinked. It is not a matter of like or dislike. I do what I must. What you must. She parroted, standing up so quickly the heavy leather chair nearly toppled over as it skidded back. She rounded fully to face him, anger simmering behind her eyes. So let me get this straight. You must lead Konoha to a civil war that killed nearly half of this village's population, most of them killed by you, by the way, when you committed the single largest act of genocide your village has ever known since the Uchiha M. Her voice was growing louder and louder as she continued, stepping closer, hands fisted at her side as her lips were curled back in a feral snarl. Is that your justification for everything you've done? That it's what you had to do? She walked around the desk and Naruto turned to face her fully this time, his height allowing him to easily tower over the girl as he laced his hands behind his back, watching as she looked up, defiant. She glared at him for all she was worth. Somewhere in her clouded mind she recognized that it would be a horrible idea to attempt to actually physically hit him, and so did the next best thing. Spitting at his feet, she returned her line of sight to his before speaking. You're nothing but a coward. Naruto's eyes shifted to the saliva currently making its way through the small hairline separations between the hardwood floorboards before looking at the Suna Kanoiki with that same languid boredom his expression always held. She was interesting, of that there was no doubt in his mind. She hid her fear well, better than most. She was his enemy, one who found herself at the greatest of disadvantages, yet her bravery, unlike so many others who stood facing him on equal or favorable grounds, did not wither beneath his gaze. In fact, it seemed to grow stronger as time progressed, an oddity, one who the people in his village were living proof of. She was not yet broken, and that is why, to him she was interesting. When she did not receive an answer from the silent target of her ire, she huffed. I bet when that news reached you about Taki and Kiri gathering in an alliance to oppose you, you were jumping for joy. She did not notice him stiffen ever so slightly where he stood. Must have gotten your rocks off on that, huh? 3 villages to bring down and 3 village leaders to K. Must have made you feel like a real big man when you finally got 'em all. She sneered. She did not notice his hands clench ever so slightly behind his back. Though she knew that he needed her alive, she also realized somewhere in the back of her mind that taunting him like this was in all likelihood a very, very, very stupid thing to do. But everything was all just so frustrating, and recent events seemed to have finally gotten to her enough to have the dam of pent-up frustrations break open on her. There was also the fact that she just wanted to see something. Some indication that this thing could be hurt. That the F beneath the armor could be hit with something, some weapon. Even if that weapon was only taunts and words. And so she continued, unaware to the rising danger. I heard one of them was a woman. Did you let your men have some fun with her, or did you do it yourself just for kicks? Though previous reactions went unnoticed, this one did not. A strong pulse of intent froze whatever words she held in her tea ready to be released, and the minute curl of his lips accompanied by narrowed eyes displayed his anger towards her statements. When his voice met her ears, it still held its lazy drawl, but there was a definitive edge to his voice, something akin to a growl though not quite. I suggest you do not speak of matters you are ignorant of, Sabaku. You are very lucky to be as important as you are. The threat was clear, and Temari did not need to contemplate very far where it would lead to. Naruto spared another glance to the books on the desk before brushing past her and leaving the room, allowing Temari the ability to breathe again as whatever intent he'd been allowing to leak out vanished with him. She sighed in relief. What had just happened? She glanced around for a moment, one which she allowed herself to catch her breath. Well, she had certainly gotten some kind of reaction. Hey! Akina's head snapped up at the sound of the familiar voice of Daisuke, her current captain. The tanned Anbu commander had a smirk on his face as he leaned down, a bowl of whatever soup had been cooked smoking in his palm as he held it out to her. Want some? Doesn't hold up well health-wise, but chukosu can make a rock taste good. Akina smiled, accepting the bowl gratefully as the man sat beside her. You did well out there today. It was just a scouting party. She replied with a small shrug. There will be bigger battles to come, she stated matter-of-factly. After a brief pause, he spoke again. Not to them. When Akina looked to him, she saw him gesturing to the Chunin team in front of them. She had been sitting on a tiny hill of sand about 4 yards or so away from the main campfire, where several of the men now sat eating their rations and showing off either their new spoils or scars. When she looked at their faces, previously masked with heavy cloth to protect from the heat, she noticed that none looked to be a day over 17. To them, Daisuke sighed. This is a victory, a great one. This is at most their second engagement. To them, they can take on the world with you here. Akina knew that, she knew the name that was whispered among the ranks as she passed by, she knew that she was their inspiration to fight. The reason they thought they could fight. The Suna commander took a sidelong glance at the girl. Are you prepared to shoulder that burden, I wonder? Akina sighed after a moment, rubbing her forehead. I need a way to counter certain techniques. What kind? He questioned as he took a sip of his own soup. Not sure if you saw it, but if you did, you remember that lightning technique Kakashi used when we fought. The one that was on his arm? Daisuke questioned. Yay. She nodded. I need to learn how to counter techniques like that one and the Rasengan. The Rasengan? He questioned, somewhat bemused. I've only heard of Jiraiya and the Devil King himself using that technique. He smirked, gaining a playful edge in his eye. Setting your sights high, huh? Akina shrugged, her own smile tugging at her lips. Yay, I guess. Still, without something to at least stop those techniques, taking on either Kakashi or Naruto will be much more difficult than what it has to be. Taking on the Devil King with anything will be difficult. Stop calling him that, she said quickly, almost snappish but not quite. Daisuke blinked for a moment. Why? It's the name people have been using for him for years. It's just, she stopped, what could she say? He's my brother, it's not right. Luckily she didn't have to finish the sentence as Daisuke was kind enough to do it for her. You're right. If we place the enemy above ourselves, they will always seem superior. Sighing, she nodded almost absent-mindedly. Yay. Daisuke smirked as he finished the last of his soup. Well, that settles it. Once we return to Suna, I'll help you find a way to counter those techniques. I'm sure Kazekage Dono will grant you access to the libraries. Akina smiled, for the first time in what seemed like months, in a rather impish way. Well, of course he will. I am the Angel of Suna, after all. Daisuke smirked at the jest. Of course. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.